Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Chris. And a lot of people have been asking me how I got absolutely diced last year. And I've gone on cuts like that before. I think I went on my first one around 2017 or so. And I've consistently been able to do cuts like this over the past few years. In practice, it can be actually complicated and kind of tricky, but the core mechanics of how it actually works are pretty simple. If you are in a calorie deficit, you are gonna lose fat. If you're eating enough protein and you're progressively overloading your strength training workouts, you're gonna preserve or gain muscle. So if you lose fat and you preserve muscle and you do this for a long enough period of time, you are going to get shredded. So when I say calorie deficit, I mean the amount of calories you burn needs to be greater than the calories that you intake. By calorie burn, we can break that down into your exercise, your basal metabolic rate, which is basically how many calories your body burns by doing nothing at all, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is the calories you burn doing movement that isn't exactly exercise, right? And then there's the thermic effect of food, which is the calories you burn as a side effect of eating and digesting. And then your calorie intake is basically your calories metabolized and absorbed from everything that you consume, like eating or drinking. If you are in a calorie deficit for a long enough period of time, you are going to lose weight, hopefully mostly fat. So if this does not work, chances are you are not actually in a calorie deficit. So you're gonna have to do a few things to make sure that you are actually in one. So what I would do is I would get a body weight scale, a food scale, and then a calorie tracking app like MyFitnessPal. I would measure all of my food as precisely as possible, and then I would weigh my body weight at least once a day in the morning, because in the morning when your stomach's empty is when your weight is as stable as possible across different days. As you start to see how your weight changes over a long period of time, and you compare that to what you're eating as you're tracking, you can start to guess and check how many calories you need to be at to be in a deficit. Some people will say that this is toxic because it is exhausting and it can get obsessive, but I would not actually need to do this for a long period of time for this to work. I would actually just measure and track everything for a few days, probably a few weeks at a time in the beginning, and afterwards, you've basically calibrated your intuition. Afterwards, you can kind of just eyeball your food and kind of just guess at the end of the day, oh, I'm roughly eating this much. And over a long period of time, it's accurate enough such that you can rest assured knowing, oh, I'm probably still in a deficit, because you can prove it with the numbers that you've shown during a certain period of time. That's basically all you need to know to do it, but in practice, in real life, this can get kind of tricky because being in a calorie deficit sucks. It's not fun. The rest of the battle is basically setting up your diet and the rest of your life such that you can sustain this without rebounding and giving up on your diet and gaining all the weight back. So the first thing I would pay attention to is how fast do you actually need to lose this weight and get shredded? If you don't actually need to lose it all by a certain period of time, I would recommend doing it as slow as possible. I would not actually recommend doing this in as short a time period as I did. It only worked for me because I've done this multiple times, so I knew what to expect. Other than that, there's a few areas I would think about. Sleep, your lifestyle around your diet, your food timing, and your food choices. A lot of this is personal preference, so I'm actually gonna show you a conversation with my friend Jeremy, who is a personal trainer, just so you can get different opinions. And also what's interesting is sleep also affects your ability to sustain the diet. If you're sleep deprived, you're kind of screwed because your appetite's really out of whack, you're craving things all the time.
You definitely want to get sleep, you definitely want to be hydrated. It's going to be hard work, right? So if you go into it knowing that this is going to be a struggle, this is going to be tough, then you'll be all right. You know, I come from that background where it's like, you got to go all out, man. You got to suffer. You got to go through pain. You got to go through these things.
And I think that's actually a big part of what throws people off when they're trying to get shredded. You know, they don't realize that you have to suffer as much as you actually do.
You gotta suffer, and the main thing is not thinking about it, right? Find other things to keep yourself occupied. You don't wanna be thinking about food all the time.
Yes.
And what can I eat? Keep yourself busy, because when you're busy, you're not thinking about food.
Yes.
Right? And it's like, you just realize like, oh, damn, I didn't eat.
That's interesting. So one thing that I found about fasting is that, you know, we can have discussions on and on and on about the actual benefits of it, but there is one benefit that I noticed personally is that it teaches me how to learn to deal with the feeling of hunger.
Yes.
Right? It just teaches you how to emotionally manage it. Even if there are no other benefits to it that you really care about, that alone is worth trying fasting.
Yes, I definitely agree with that.
right? It's kind of like budgeting your calories. When are you the most okay with skipping a meal to save those calories? For me, skipping breakfast is doable because my willpower is a lot higher in the morning. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna budget these calories for later on because I still need to be in a caloric deficit, but I don't wanna just feel like I'm cutting everything, so I can eat a little more at night.
Based on my personal schedule, it's dinner time.
Dinner time's
I'm notorious for skipping dinners.
Do you think it matters the type of diet you go on in terms of your timing? Like, does it matter if you eat 6 meals a day evenly? Does it matter if you fast? Does it matter if you do 1 meal a day or so on? To me, in my opinion, as long as you're in a calorie deficit, whichever one gets you in the calorie deficit most effectively is gonna work. But what do you think?
I agree with that. I agree with that. I agree with that. As long as you're at a calorie deficit,
right.
It's fine.
And these are just ways to play around with it to help yourself get through it.
Exactly.
Based on what makes you feel good.
Exactly.
Right. So one other thing that is really interesting is how much does the type of food matter, right? As long as you get protein, right? Let's say you keep track of your carbs and your fats and you're eating the right amount of calories to be in a deficit, right? How much does it matter what types of food you eat?
I think it matters a lot. You know, I want to eat the lightest meals possible. I want to eat fruits. I want to eat, if I'm eating food, it's actual vegetables. You know what I mean? That has nutritional value.
The reason vegetables are such a hack is because they're very satiating and it takes you a long time to eat them, so you feel like you're eating a pretty big meal, but they just have very little calories because it's like mostly fiber and a lot of water, right? But they feel very dense, right? Whenever I'd eat like ground meat, I'll get like 100 calories of like ground beef, but then I put in a bunch of like spinach and a bunch of carrots and a bunch of bell peppers, and it's like this, and it feels so much better.
And yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How do you feel about like cheat meals? Like, oh, as long as I hit my macros, let me eat like a piece of chocolate or a donut or something.
I'm the worst with that. You know,
I'm pretty bad with that
just because I have a sweet tooth.
Me too, dude. I eat dessert all the time.
And like, I'm always eating snacks. I'm always snacking on chips and cookies, and like I'll have that as a meal. Like that'll be my meal. You know what I mean? And people are like, oh, but again, it's the work that you put in after, right? Like,
right.
How many calories are you actually exerting throughout the day, right?
As long as you're net over a long period of time in a calorie deficit, the types of food, as long as it can keep you in a calorie deficit without you giving up on your diet, you can make it work, regardless of the types of food. Basically, yeah, that's one thing that frustrated me too, is because I knew some people that I was kind of doing the cut with, and they were very adamant about doing the whole chicken, rice, and broccoli thing or doing the keto thing. And I'm like, yeah, if that works for you, sure, but you don't need to do that, right? As long as you're in a calorie deficit,
no, you don't.
You're eating enough protein. You don't need to do that. Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah,
we're on the same page.
I'm not with those keto diets, being vegan and all that.
So keto does work in some cases because, like, for example, when I was cutting, I just needed to get the weight down. I didn't really care about whether or not I was fat, so I needed to cut a lot of water weight, right? So before my weigh-in for my Muay Thai competition, I would go on keto for a week just because carbs hold water, right? So I would go on keto and I would drop water weight. Do you still weight train?
Now I actually weight train more now than I have in the past, and it's just mixing it up a little bit. Yeah, but definitely not like all weight training. Like I'm always doing some sort of calisthenics.
Because calisthenics, you would say, burns more calories, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Weight training doesn't really burn them. So weight training, I think, is good because it helps preserve muscle mass while you're cutting. But for the actual cutting itself, like burning calories, it doesn't actually burn that many calories, no. How do you feel about low intensity, steady state cardio then? Because let's say walking uphill on a treadmill, right? How do you feel about that? Did you ever use like or cycling, or let's say very light jogging, right? Did you ever do that when you were cutting?
Oh yeah, that's super important. That's the recovery. Right. That's what you use for recovery.
The reason I liked those while I was cutting is because it does still burn calories, but it's easy to recover from because you're already kind of suffering from being on a diet. So you don't want to explode in a sprint or something like that, because then you're sure you'll burn calories, but it's not worth how much more recovery you would need.
Walking, cycling, low intensity, low impact exercises and activities are definitely beneficial to weight cutting and to just overall health and wellness.
And it helps you manage appetite too, because while you're exercising, you're not thinking about food. Or maybe you are, but you're less likely to think about food.
Unless you've been on like a 24-hour fast or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely you're good after that. You know what I mean?
So I want to summarize like the main points that we've kind of covered, just to go over kind of stuff we've agreed on. So 1, calorie deficit. Yeah, everything else is super important, but if you're not in the calorie deficit, you're not going to get cut, you're not going to get shredded, right? Sleep, hydration, vegetables, because keep you full. satiated, kind of a hack for feeling like you're eating bigger meals. Doing it slowly, if possible, unless you really need to cut weight really short period of time.
Yep.
Doing it slowly is gonna make you less likely to rebound and actually gain all the weight back. And it took me so many mess ups to realize that, because I'm like, you know what? No, I'm impatient. I want to do this in like a month, 2 months. And then 6 months later, I'm back at the weight I started at. And it's just like, oh, if I just cut slowly that whole time, I would have saved myself all that effort. Anything else you want to add?
No, not at all. I think we covered a lot.
Covered a lot, yeah. Awesome. Good shit. Thank you, man.
Chris,
Appreciate it, bro.
you. Anytime.